Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in for our August 2020 advocacy update. Really appreciate folks taking time out of their day to hear everything that AOPA has been up to on the Hill and trying to promote your interests in front of Congress. As always, if anyone has any questions, there is a question box on your little screen there on that sidebar. By all means, type in those questions and I'll be checking in with Ashley every once in a while just to see if folks have specific questions, things they'd like to talk about. And you please do speak up, ask those questions. If you have anything that's a little bit more specific or want me to go into more detail on anything that we don't have time for here, or anything that we even haven't discussed here, elections, anything, send an email to the email address you see on your screen. I am happy to chat about anything. So again, thank you for taking the time and tuning in. This will be recorded. As always, if you want to go back and rewatch it or share it out with friends, colleagues, anybody that you think might be interested, would greatly appreciate that. So we talked a little bit about this on our last webinar, and I'll mention the last webinar. We have a recording of our July 2020 webinar in which we kind of covered a lot of what had been going on up until this point, especially on COVID legislation. So if you need that information, go back and watch that July 2020 webinar, reach out to me. I'm happy to talk through it with you. We're not going to cover all of that, but obviously in the last month, things have not changed too much here in DC. We're still doing everything by Zoom. That is me with Senator Cassidy and Senator Gaines. You'll be hearing their names in a little bit because they have introduced a bill that's of great importance to AOPA, but again, we can't be in the same room. Senator Grassley is the chair of the committee that will have jurisdiction over that bill and can't be in a room with him either. And we also can't be in the room with his Democratic counterpart, Ron Wyden. So we are, all of our on the Hill work, as it has been for going on 6 months now, is off the Hill. So we're on the Zooms a lot, on the phone a lot, as I'm sure all of you are as well. So this is the way we lobby these days. It's a new way of doing things. I haven't quite adjusted to it yet, but it certainly means I don't have to wear suits, which is very, very nice. Let's talk about a couple of key pieces of legislation. I mentioned that if you want more information on everything COVID related that Congress has done up until this point, either reach out to me directly or go back and watch that July webinar where we covered everything from tip to toes on that. But it is worth noting a couple of updates since that last webinar that we did last month. One is that the Paycheck Protection Program has officially closed. As of now, they are not awarding any more, I put the word loans in quotation marks because of course they don't have to be paid back, but that program as of now is closed. And I say as of now because as you probably know, Congress left town, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, without doing anything COVID related. They didn't expand the Paycheck Protection Program. They didn't add any more money to it. They didn't do anything. So they left without adding onto that program. So it has officially closed as of August 8th. What has not closed is the economic injury disaster loans. These are a little bit different in terms of who can get them and the payback mechanisms, but they are another way of keeping your business afloat if you need financial help during this crisis. You can go on SBA's website and get a lot more information about that. You can also reach out to me directly, and we're happy to answer any questions on that. But if you are seeking new funding, that is probably it's really the only way to do it right now is through those economic injury disaster loans. Because as of now, again, the Paycheck Protection Program has closed. I anticipate that before, this is kind of me prognosticating, sending a little bit of a guess, but with the way, not necessarily, well, let me rephrase. The Republicans have their virtual RNC next week. The Democrats, as you know, are doing theirs this week. It would be somewhat beneficial, would have been beneficial before they left town for the Republicans to try to promote something. So I would expect in the next week or so, maybe the next week and a half, that you will see Republicans starting to talk about what they'll do when they get back to DC in September in terms of COVID relief. They had a bill that was around $1 billion in funding, sorry, $1 trillion in funding for various things. Compare that with the House bill, which had $3 trillion in funding for a whole slew of things. The Democrats in the House by no means expected to get $3 trillion. That bill was more of a message bill. They packed everything they possibly could in it, and then sent it to the Senate and said whatever they take, is a win for us. The Senate chose to take nothing. But they did introduce their own $1 trillion bill. I would expect that you'll start seeing Republican senators come back with packages that are about in the midway point, in the high 1 trillions or maybe around 2 trillion, with a little bit of extra funding in there, just so they can have more talking points and more things that they say they're going to try to do during their virtual RNC when that comes up. I can't guarantee that's true, but we will see. And we'll talk a little bit more about something that the House might do in just a minute. One thing that has changed since the last time we chatted back in July was we have a Senate bill. The Medicare Orthotics and Prosthetics Patient-Centered Care Act has been introduced in the Senate by Senator Warner. He's our lead Democrat, and Senator Daines of Montana, who is our lead Republican. Senator Duckworth of Illinois, Senator Cassidy of Louisiana, and Senator Cornyn of Texas also were original sponsors of this bill. This bill, just so folks know, and I'm going to be going into what's in this bill in a minute, but it is exactly the same word for word as the House bill. So if you've studied up on HR 5262, which is the House equivalent, then you know what's in this bill. But just to kind of cover it again, and here is Senator Warner's press release. This was from his website. It's interesting that the headline of this is to improve care for seniors. That is not necessarily a talking point we have ever used, but it seemed to ring with his office, so that's the one they went with. And just as an aside, it's very interesting, this bill does quite a few things. It's interesting what has resonated with different senators and members of the House throughout this, not just throughout the pandemic, but before this pandemic. So Senator Warner's staff talked about what this bill would do for seniors. We'll talk about what the bill would do for telehealth, which is an argument that has been really resonating on the Hill. As folks know, of course, you live this, you do this for a living, you've been seeing an uptick, in some cases a massive uptick in telehealth. We, of course, can't bill for telehealth. So some of the waivers that have been granted, we've just been trying to find a way through Congress or through CMS to be allowed through the pandemic to bill for telehealth. It comes as a bit of a shock to a lot of members of Congress and their staff to find out that we can't do this. So that is an argument that has really resonated. And now, one of the other things, well, we'll get to that. I'll talk about what the bill does, and then we'll talk about what's resonating now. So the number one priority that a lot of our members have, and I know a lot of folks who are listening in to this webinar have, is the ability to distinguish orthotists and prosthetists from suppliers of durable medical equipment. You have heard me say this a lot if you've tuned into the July webinar, or you've been to the policy forum or the virtual policy forum, or even had conversations with me. It's a bit of a surprise when members of Congress and the staff find out that we are lumped in with DME. Despite the clinical nature of what we do, the patient care aspect of what we do, we are viewed, of course, as suppliers of medical equipment. And that to say that it sells us short on what we do for a living is an understatement. So the number one thing we have to do, not only to get that kind of extra cachet and be separated from DME, in addition to being able to bill for telehealth, in addition to finding new ways to create registries for our data and be able to do a little bit more research-based work on the work that we do. We have to distinguish ourselves from DME. So that is the number one priority of that bill, and certainly the thing we are going to try hardest to push across the finish line. We want to restore the definition, Congress's definition of off-the-shelf orthotics. CMS greatly expanded the definition of off-the-shelf and minimal self-adjustment to include things that can be adjusted by caregivers or suppliers, which obviously is not self-adjusted. So we want to make sure that self-adjustment means self-adjustment. We want to prohibit the drop shipment of orthoses and prostheses to patients. We'll talk about that more in a second because it has come around again. And we want to exempt orthotists and prosthetists from competitive bidding requirements. There's no reason why someone shouldn't be able to go where someone with limb loss or limb difference shouldn't go to their prosthetist to get fitted for their prostheses, receive their prostheses, and not be able to get the orthoses for the other side at the same office, have it all done in the same place, really help the patient to improve their quality of life. So those are the four big things that the bill does. Going back to the drop shipping thing, you probably have seen this in some of our communications. You may have stumbled across this just in day-to-day reading. There have been 3 recent reports by the Office of the Inspector General noting, bringing attention to 3 different companies that have been sending out orthoses that were not medically necessary, that OIG deemed to be not medically necessary. I will preface this by saying that this is not Operation Brace Yourself. This is not any sort of indictment. There were no arrests. Nothing like that happened here. These are just reports by the Office of the Inspector General noting that these 3 companies, and I'll scroll through these now, have been billing in ways that are brought some attention to the OIG. And this is, again, emphasizing that no one has been accused of doing anything illegal as of yet. This is exactly what we're trying to stop. We don't want anyone getting an orthoses that either they don't need or that they don't know how to use. It's bad for our industry. It's certainly a bad look, and it's worst of all, it's bad for the patients. It's terrible for the patients, and we are trying to curb that. When Operation Brace Yourself happened last year, and there was over $1 billion in Medicare fraud uncovered by that investigation, those investigations. The argument we kept making on the Hill is this is a big deal, and it's great that we're bringing attention to this issue, and it's great that we're trying to keep patients safe. Operation Brace Yourself doesn't stop the next person from doing it. And now we're seeing, in the midst of a pandemic, not only people taking advantage of these lax rules, some of them have actually gotten PPP loans to do it, which is even worse. But they're without our bill passing, without this being codified, it's not stopping the next person from drop shipping in this way. So again, I talked about how different parts of this bill resonate at different times on the Hill. This is one that's really resonating right now as these OIG reports come out. So members of Congress calling us up and saying, what can we do to stop this? And us being able to say, hey, well, as a matter of fact, we've been trying to stop this for a long time, since before Operation Brace Yourself, and we've got a piece of legislation that can do it. So it's a huge part of this bill now. And so you don't want to say something like this, these reports are timely, because you never want to see reports like this. But, the way they're kind of happening now at these 3 in rapid succession are certainly giving us ammunition on the Hill to talk about the importance of that factor of this bill. So, and again, kind of getting back to the separation piece, again, this perception that we're part of DME and negatively impacts our profession. So we really just need to separate ourselves in that way. And again, one of the ways that we are making that argument is by noting that there is no path to telehealth right now for us. I should have talked about this on the last webinar, but Congressman Mike Thompson of California circulated a bipartisan letter that went to Azar, Secretary Azar of HHS, and Administrator Seema Verma from CMS, saying that there has to be some sort of mechanism for OMP to bill for telehealth during the public health emergency. Senator Brian Schatz of Hawaii has introduced a bill. He actually introduced it back in November, long before the pandemic even started, that would create waivers for telehealth for certain folks like occupational therapists, physical therapists. All of those have been granted waivers independently of that legislation by CMS. So we're working with Senator Schatz to kind of get written into that bill. Senator Lamar Alexander, who is chair of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee in the Senate. He's a Republican from Tennessee. He's retiring, so he's got he's in this kind of an aside here, but when members of Congress or senators retire, there's this perception, and sometimes it is reality, that they're going to do things that they wouldn't normally have done. They're going to push for things that they wouldn't normally have pushed for, maybe because they were fiscal conservatives, one reason or another, but they're going to kind of say, all right, I want this to get done before I leave. I want this to be part of my legacy. So Senator Alexander is all in on creating numerous new avenues to telehealth. So not only did he introduce his own piece of legislation to do that, he is furiously backing Senator Schatz's legislation. Senator Schatz is a Democrat. So you've got this lifelong Republican who's retiring, pushing a Democrat bill to promote telehealth on the Senate side. We are working with both of those staffs to get written into that legislation. On the House side, again, Mike Thompson, who led that letter for us, he is chair of the Congressional Telehealth Caucus. He also happens to be the lead sponsor of the House version of the Patient-Centered Care Act. We're working closely with him to try to get something in his legislation that would give us a carve-out for telehealth as well. So a huge argument that we're trying to make throughout this pandemic is trying to find a way to bill for telehealth. So I kind of don't need to go into all of this. I can let you read it rather than reading what's here on the screen. But again, you know, different arguments about this bill, different facets of it are finding seeds at different times, to the point where you know, as Congress tries to work through what's next for this COVID legislation. And I'll say I was surprised as anyone that they left without doing anything. If I were a betting man, I would say that there was no way they could have gone home to face their constituents for a month-long recess, to face their party conventions without having done something on COVID. And we worked furiously to become part of that, and we've had good inroads to add some of these provisions to whatever COVID package comes next. So we'll kind of talk about what comes next in a second, but a lot of what we're doing is, as I've said, is relevant to COVID, and so we're trying to make sure Congress knows that. And so yeah, so here are our next steps. Trying to include parts of this legislation in part of that COVID package. Again, some of this really fits. If we can distinguish O&P from DME, we find a way to bill for telehealth. We find a way to separate ourselves from you know, folks who are suppliers of DME, which we are not. And the pandemic would seem to be a smart time to do that. It really, the work that we're doing really illustrates how different we are from DME. Again, not to belabor the point, that ban on drop shipping with some of those OIG reports that are coming out, you know, it's a good time for us to be able to do that. Similar reasons. We want to return to that congressional definition of off the shelf, because some of those bad players who are sending folks braces they don't need are going with that CMS definition of off the shelf, which is not the same as congressional. So you're not only sending folks braces they don't need, they don't even know how to put them on. So we need to stop that. And independent of that legislation, we want to postpone the competitive bidding for off-the-shelf orthotics for at least a year. This is the wrong time to reinstall a competitive bidding program for off-the-shelf orthotics. So putting in that, postponing that would be a great help to our members, and something else we're trying to get in the next legislation. That is not, again, to clarify, in our bill, either the House or the Senate bill, but it is something we're working with Congress to try to get into the next COVID package. And obviously create a path for telehealth billing. That's tied directly to distinguishing ourselves from DME. But independent of our work on this legislative side, we are also, we've sent letters to CMS. We're having members of Congress send letters to CMS to try to find a way to make that happen throughout the public health emergency. So even if we can't get the legislation done, we want to make sure that we're telling CMS that this is an issue. We need to garner as many co-sponsors on that bill as possible. Since the last time we talked, I think we've had 3 more co-sponsors join the House bill. We are working furiously to get some folks on that Senate bill, and you can help us with that. So I will talk about how to do that in just a minute. And we want to make sure that the bill gets a hearing. We get a lot on the House side. We need a hearing to follow what they call regular order. Our bill is in front of, on the House side, it's in front of 2 committees. The Ways and Means Committee, which is oversees part of it, and then the Energy and Commerce Committee. Energy and Commerce has primary jurisdiction, so if this bill is going to pass, it's probably going to be through Ways and Means, through Energy and Commerce. They have a bit of a strict way. The chairman of that committee is Frank Pallone, congressman from New Jersey. He has a very strict way of doing things, where a bill gets brought up for a hearing, and then it goes from the subcommittee to the full committee, and then goes to the full House. That's the standard way that most bills pass, but there are lots of ways to circumnavigate that. But Chairman Pallone does not want to do that. However, there have been bills in the past that have separated certain things, and I'm thinking specifically of power wheelchairs, from DME that went through without regular order. So there is precedent. Pallone is the chair of the full committee. Congresswoman Anna Eshoo of California is the chair of the subcommittee, the health subcommittee of Energy and Commerce, with jurisdiction over this. And we have had very good talks with her staff about finding a way to circumnavigate regular order to get this done. Now, that said, our bill just got introduced in the Senate, and it was hugely important that that happened, because you saw that picture of Senator Grassley earlier. Senator Grassley is the chair of the Senate Finance Committee. That is the committee of jurisdiction for our bill in the Senate. Senator Grassley was also the senator that introduced this bill in the last Congress. This is his baby. He has worked on this in the past. He wants to see this get done. So the fact that we finally got a bill done and that it's in front of his committee gives us a much better chance in the Senate, frankly, than it does in the House. And ideally, the bill gets through the Senate, passes the Senate, goes to the House where we can pass it without any muss and fuss. That would be great. We can get it done that way. All that said, that's the way it would work in a perfect world. Because of COVID, because of a very constrained congressional schedule, because of an election year, because they haven't even done any appropriations work yet, the odds of us getting this bill done as a standalone measure are infinitesimal. It's just probably not going to happen that way. So there are lots of pieces of larger legislation that need to get done by the end of the year, whether it's extenders that extend Medicare programs for another year, tax provisions, things like that. There are lots of bills that they're going to need to get done probably after the election that are just going to get packed like Christmas trees or under the Christmas tree with all sorts of different things in it, all non-controversial, which our bill is. So that is that is really the ultimate goal, is to get our bill into one of those must-pass pieces of legislation at the end of the year. We stand a much, much better chance of doing that if we've got a lot of co-sponsors on the legislation, because it shows bipartisan interest across a wide variety of members of Congress. And we've also got a better shot if we get a hearing in the House or the Senate. But as I said, I think we'll get one in the Senate. So we keep bringing attention to this issue, keep hammering on doors, keep telling staffers about what this bill would do and how the facets of it change. That's everything we're doing right now. So there's a huge, that's most of our efforts on Capitol Hill right now are going to be getting this thing across the finish line. We are very, very close. I feel like we've gotten so much done since this Congress has been in for a year and a half, and we could not have done any of that without advocates like you. So before I move on, let me pause right there. I've been talking for a full-on 22 minutes straight now. So let me take a break and see if anybody has any questions or anything they need clarified in what we've said so far. And get a sip of water.
Please take your sip of water, Justin. We don't have any specific questions for you right now, but as you go on to share some places that our attendees can find information, I'm going to share those links in the chat.
Thank you. And Ashley, in addition to helping me with questions here, is of course the person who knows a lot more than I do. So when I see something wrong, Ashley is going to jump in and correct me. So that could happen too.
You haven't said anything wrong.
So let's get back to something I mentioned earlier. So there is Congress is out. The Senate is out until September the 8th, and the House is out until September the 14th. Nancy Pelosi has already said that she is bringing the House back to pass some legislation that would protect the post office. Even though, the Postmaster General, I'm sure you all saw this in the news, yesterday at a hearing kind of promised that he would put the kibosh on any major changes to postal delivery until after the election. I think a lot of members of the House kind of booked their flights and made their plans, and they were ready to come back after the convention, either later this week or early next week. I would assume that they'll come back and try to do something else COVID related, since they were already coming back anyway. That gives the Senate the opportunity to maybe come back and find a compromise and get something done before the RNC, so they can say, hey, look, we compromised, we got something done, we're looking out for Americans. So we went from thinking, okay, we've got a month, we've got all of August to really kind of lay the groundwork and do what we need to do to get the provisions I mentioned earlier pushed into that COVID bill. We might not. They might come back, kind of surprise everyone in August for a rare August session. By the same token, with that Postal Service issue seemingly at least temporarily taken care of, they might say we're better off home campaigning and being in front of our constituents. So time will tell, but again, we're pushing to get those provisions in the next COVID bill whenever and whatever it looks like. This has, I'm sure I don't have to tell you, we're all doing stuff on the fly and doing things we never thought we'd be doing. This has been a very, very crazy time here in DC, from everything from the legislative process to the conventions. I mean, I think everyone who is a Democrat or a Democrat ally thought they'd be in Milwaukee this week, and instead they're all home watching on their computers, just as folks thought they'd be in Charlotte. The Republicans thought they'd be in Charlotte. Then they thought they'd be in Jacksonville, and now they're all going to be home. So we've never seen anything quite like this before. And so having the entire Congress come back in August to pass one piece of legislation, that would just fit the bill for everything that's been going on. It wouldn't surprise me at all. So probably the most important part of this is what can you do? You've heard all of the things that we're doing. We need your voice. The number one thing you can do is visit aopavotes.org if you have not already. You see that alert that is on there, the Medicare OMP Patient-Centered Care Act. Write to your senators, write to your representative, ask them to co-sponsor that legislation. Everything you need is in that toolkit. There's a pre-written letter. You don't even have to do anything. You just type in your name and address, and boom, you can send that alert off, and you can let your members of Congress know that they need to support that legislation. That said, I would really appreciate your kind of taking just a minute to edit what we have written there and talk a little bit about who you are, what you do, the work that you've done, the patients that you're seeing, because that resonates a lot more than just the kind of stuff that we've written. You know, like I said, there's a pre-written letter there, and it's great. It'll say everything that needs to get said, but your story as a constituent is much more important because they want to hear from you. Contact from you, an in-person visit from you, even though we can't do those now, very, very, very huge. Your voice is so important to your members of Congress, and it brings a level that I cannot bring since I don't live where you live. I don't have that connection with your member of Congress. My member of Congress here in Virginia is Don Beyer. It works out that he's on the Ways and Means Committee. And so I've developed a great relationship with him, which comes in very handy. But strongly recommend that you write that letter, write that email, and get to know your member of Congress yourself. And I'll put these dates up here again because they're home. I mean, like I said, they might be coming back end of this week, maybe early next week to pass some legislation, but for the most part, they are in their district or in their state, Senate till September 8th, House until September 14th. They don't have a lot to do. This is not like an ordinary August where they would be out having rallies, having, going to cookouts and things like that, and Labor Day parades and all these sorts of things. None of that is happening. They are, for the most part, staying at home, meeting with their constituents via Zoom, and conducting as much business as they can from district offices in their houses. That presents you with an amazing opportunity to get on Zooms like the ones that you saw, like the photos you saw earlier in the presentation. They want to talk to you. They want to know what it is that's on your mind. What can they be doing to help? And if you want to do that, and we strongly recommend that you do, please do reach out to me. I'll put my email address up again. If you want to get something set up with a member of Congress or your senator or their staff, please do let me know, because I can guarantee you we can make it happen. And your voice, as I said, is so much more influential than our voices, because you're the ones, well, my voice, I should say. You're the ones that do this for a living. You're the ones that are practicing. You're out there in the field. You're the ones helping patients. And I am your voice in DC, but I don't do what you do for a living. So it is much better coming from you than it is from me. So please reach out to me if you want to make something like that happen. Over the past couple of months, we've had, you saw the Zoom we were on with Senator Steve Daines of Montana. We were lucky enough to get 2 practitioners in Montana to get on with him, and they had a great conversation. We had folks from Georgia talk with Senator Perdue about what they're doing. So it just means a lot more coming from folks practicing in their state than it does for me. So please do reach out. And let's get you connected. We have a PAC. I don't know who on this call has been authorized to be solicited, so I can't say too much specific about our PAC, but it is a very powerful weapon that we wield in Washington, D.C., especially in an election year. There are a lot of folks that are our champions that are having tough re-election battles, and our PAC is able to help them out, keep our champions in Congress where they belong. We are fiercely bipartisan. If you tune into, well, I'll talk about that in a second. But we give to both sides of the aisle as long as they're our champions, as long as they're going to bat for us. We want to make sure they stay in Congress. We can't do that without you, without the help of supporters of that PAC. So please do look up information on our PAC on our website. You can find everything you need to know, or reach out to me directly, and I can help you out. But a PAC is a very powerful tool to us to have. And speaking of the PAC, I hope you all are going to be joining us at our virtual assembly September 9th through 12th. We're not going to be in Vegas. We're going to be at home. But it's going to be a great program. And I will mention specifically that on Friday, September 11th, we will be having a virtual event for our PAC donors. As of now, Congressman Stephen Horsford of Nevada will be part of that. Sorry, Nevada will be part of that. Congressional schedules change, but as of now, he is on board to be part of that PAC reception for us. We're not in Vegas, but he represents Vegas, so he's going to bring the Vegas to us. And so hope you can join us, not only for all of the virtual National Assembly, but specifically that PAC event, which is at 4 o'clock on Friday, September the 11th. And what else do I have? I think that is it, actually, if I can make my slides go. Oh, yeah, of course, our next webinar, mark your calendars now, is right after that virtual assembly has concluded. So the next week is September 16th. That's our next webinar, and we'll have, I'm sure, some serious updates on what Congress will be doing in the fall. If they don't come back to do COVID this summer, they're definitely going to do, that's going to be the first thing they do when they get back in September. The House doesn't come back until September 14th, but I would assume they'll have something ready to roll out right as soon as they get back. So that'll be the first thing. Then they'll have to do appropriations, and also I'll talk a little bit more about that on our next webinar, because we have research funding, very important research funding that's in those appropriations bills. And weirdly enough, the fate of our Wounded Warrior bill might be tied up in appropriations. So we'll talk a little bit about that in the next webinar as well. So please tune in on September the 16th. And that is everything I had. So I will stop there again and see if anyone has any last minute questions, comments, thoughts.
We don't have any questions. I just see a chat here. Let's see what it says. Oh, okay. We've got, that's just us talking to you all. So yeah, nothing to report, Justin.
Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. I greatly appreciate it. And please do reach out. My email address is right there on your screen. Reach out to me with anything you want to talk about, questions, comments, thoughts. Please do reach out if you want to meet with your legislator or their staff during this break. It is a very good time to do that. Maybe there has never been a better break, summer August recess, to meet with your legislators, because we're all at home and they're all at home. So it's a great time. Please do reach out and we can make that happen. And thanks everybody for tuning in. We appreciate it.